Good evening, through the prayers of Holy Fathers, which Jesus Christ, God have mercy on us and save us. Amen. Evening all, it's the Sunday live questions and comments thing, and let us play the wonderful intro we have. I'm maybe changing the music here, but let me see here. 1 second. Okay, hold on. Whoa.
If you take a look, believe it or not, there are millions of true Orthodox all over the world who are confessing the faith. They're teaching the Orthodox faith you thought you learned. So for 90% of you listening to this podcast, you didn't know who I was, but you did believe in the 7 councils, right? You don't believe that the 4th council or the 5th council is up for debate or discussion? You don't believe David Bentley Hart isn't a heretic? You think he might be one? Become true Orthodox. You've made it this far, and we invite you to do so. Thank you.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Still getting used to having that as a thing. So if I forget to put it on, that is why. Benedicite, Master bless.
The Lord bless through the prayers of Holy Fathers, the Lord Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen.
Okay. Okay, so we're doing our question and answer show. Okay, so the keyboard. I have a feeling this is about my keyboard. I feel like
it's very loud. You could hear everything.
It's a mechanical keyboard. I got this mechanical.
Show it
keyboard.
to us.
Okay.
I want to see what you mean by mechanical. Oh wow! Wow.
Yeah. Well, it's a Walmart brand, the ONN brand, but it's the reason why I guess I've learned mechanical keyboards are apparently important is because of the fact that when they're not mechanical, when they're membrane keyboards, so the keys touch membranes. Like I've bought like 3 of those in the past 4 years. They just break very quickly and they're irreparable. A mechanical keyboard, it's all mechanical parts. You can actually take it apart. And
so I have this like Logitech keyboard. Would mine not be considered mechanical? I guess it has buttons and such.
Some Logitechs are mechanical keyboards, but they also make membrane keyboards as well. The way to tell is when you click it, you'll feel some sort of resistance. As it comes back up, it's pretty apparent. You can tell the difference because it pushes back. Yeah, like that sounds like a mechanical keyboard.
Oh well, maybe it is. Okay.
Yeah, you might have a mechanical keyboard.
I just thought it was a normal keyboard. I didn't know about anything else. So,
but I don't know why it's showing up so loud as mine.
All right, well, that's fine. Let's move on to more important things.
Got it.
Do we have any news items to discuss?
I mean, there's the thing about the Ukrainian boy was like the 14-year-old who got like thrown into a van by the army.
Yes.
That was today. Apparently a Ukrainian teenager at 14 was abducted, thrown into a van by special services, and it was going to be assumed that they were going to they were trying to conscript him into the army until they asked how old he was, and he said 14. And then they asked for ID, and then they just threw him out of the van and left him like 2 miles from his house. So he had to walk back, or like a few more. It's like 13 kilometers.
13 miles. Yeah, that's like 7 miles. Well, he's was in a good situation that they didn't just because they claimed that he was tall and he had broad shoulders, so they could have just thrown away his passport and then just said.
Yeah, I don't think they wanted to kill him though. So
yeah, at least they had some standards, as small as they were. Okay, so Okay, that's
Yeah,
an issue.
I'm saying.
I'm
Well,
trying to
so
think.
yeah, that's kind of like I haven't seen any. Let me think. I'm trying to think of recent church news. There hasn't been too much. Today is the feast of the Annunciation, obviously, so that is an important feast.
It's also the anniversary, the 5-year anniversary of the repose of Metropolitan Angelos of Avlona.
Was it 3? I thought it was
2019.
3 years.
2000 was it? No. 20.
2021? No.
Hold on. I think I got to look up now. I can't really believe I forgot. I mean, it's on the calendar.
Yeah. So, well, I have the calendar in front of me. I'm pretty sure, unless my eyes are failing me, it's 2021.
Okay, it was 2021. Okay.
Yeah.
So 3 years. Okay.
Yeah, and he was,
He,
very
he was not in the
important.
greatest health, but he one of the things I think was important about Mitron Angelos and in Validica Porphyrius, who reposed a few days before him, so I think maybe like 2 days before him, was that he refused to close down any of his churches during the COVID lockdown, even though they put the government, even though other true Orthodox jurisdictions were closing down churches, the state church was closing them down. Mitron Angelos' position was no. They absolutely not. They came there with the police and threatened him. He was fine. You
Well,
arrest.
I believe in his statement against it, he basically referred to it as a precursor to Antichrist.
Yeah, because remember, Antichrist will demand that the sacrifice stops, and a lot of fathers interpret that as meaning the divine services, specifically the liturgy, publicly has to be stopped. So they refused to close down anything, and Mitron Angelos wasn't in the greatest health. He had a very bad back for years. He was basically wheelchair bound for like the last 10 years of his life.
Yeah.
He could get up and occasionally such. He had to have his thyroid removed in a surgery like 30 years ago or something, which I think is a big, I guess, that's not a nice thing to have. Validica Porphyrius, who was his deputy, had there was a condition he had. It's like almost like a form of gigantism, where your body pituitary gland keeps on releasing growth hormones and such. So if you ever have met Archie Porphyrius, he was like 6'6". His hands were gigantic. It was like almost like an Andre the Giant, like that type.
Yeah,
of
he was a really big. I'm 6'4".
Yes.
He was a big guy.
Yeah, and he was just a massive person, and that also comes with like a lot of heart problems. So they were in. Yeah. So if they got COVID, if they actually got sick, then it would be really bad. All right.
John MC asks, acromegaly is that?
I think, yeah, he had a form. I think he told me he had a form of acromegaly. I think that's what it was.
Also, John MC does note that today is also the commemoration of Saint Tikhon,
Saint Sabas and Kaliminos.
Yep, and Saint Justin of Chelyea.
So anyway,
so it's a big day today in the church.
So Mitron Angelos, just to close up on this, he eventually did, after like 2 years of serving, because remember, he was just not serving in churches, he was visiting places. They were carrying him everywhere. He did get sick, all right, and he did go into a coma, and Archbishop Porphyrius ended up passing away, all right.
Yeah.
And then when Mitron Angelos came out of his coma, they said Archbishop Porphyrius had died, and then he had a heart attack. He basically was so shocked at that. But the point is that he never regretted, from what I was told, not closing down the churches, because the idea is that because his idea is that if you're a priest, you're going to have to, even if you're a regular Christian, you have to risk death. All right, as people may not like to hear that, but you do not close down church services, because
you can't be afraid of the worldly authorities.
Exactly.
You have to,
because look, people get sick and die all the time of terrible flus. All right. I mean, there was up until like 1950 in Greece, between 45 or 44 and 1948 or 49 in Greece, something like 500,000 people died of tuberculosis.
Yeah.
Right. Part of that was due to the Allied bombing, destroyed the infrastructure. The country just took years, and then the Civil War happened. As far as I understand, churches were still open. All right. They didn't, no one is, at least none of the true Orthodox said close down all the churches. I can tell you 500,000 people, or at least, several 100,000 people dying of tuberculosis in a 5 or 6 year period in a country like Greece that had like 7 million people in it in 1945, that's a lot worse than COVID.
Yeah.
All right. That's something like what's 500,000 out of, it may have been 5 million people living in Greece. That's 10% of the population.
Yeah, it was like if I remember, it was 8 million people. So
And
it
then
was.
then the Civil War with the communists, one thing after the other. I mean, can you imagine telling people close down the churches, don't come to church, don't take any of the sacraments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, when they need, and it's those times that they need the sacraments the most.
Yep.
Right? St. Gregory Palamas still served during the Black Plague. Okay, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's nothing. My point is that it's nothing compared to what we endured through history. So.
Very seldom do Annunciation and the Veneration of the Cross coincide. May 5th is one of the 3 latest days on which Pascha may fall. May 5th, May 6th, and May 8th. So far, never on May 7th.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Modern people have gotten too removed from death to the point where it's the worst thing in the world. Absolutely true. That we've gotten to a point where we're so materialistic. Society has become so materialistic that death looks like the real enemy, whereas death is just a part of living. Before you go on, Death to Compromise says, I have a feeling this is going to be a fire stream tonight. I have no idea. I'm not sure why people are assuming this is going to be a spicy stream. I don't know. Did I give a hint that something spicy was going to be said? I'm curious now. I am curious because there must be something that's going to come out. I have a feeling it might be the COVID thing. I mean, we can talk about the COVID thing some more.
The police called the Abbey here and were like, "You need to close down." However, they couldn't really do anything because look, we're so far out of the way. And, even like when people want to get here, oftentimes they can't because the road is washed out or something like that.
Yeah.
So there was like, they couldn't even really do anything to us, so, but, that was, I mean, I knew a case of, there were cases of people who, thought.
Wasn't there a point where the police were calling Vladika John every week to check on like the attendance or something?
They were like, if you have more than 15 people, then you have to close down or something like that.
And didn't he say it was going to be like,
well,
no?
Look, we don't, we have people come here, but if we don't have that, just trying to get here is impossible. In the winter, it's not going to happen at all unless you're willing to walk through the half a mile of snow. So it would just happen to be they couldn't really do much. But even if we had like 150 people coming here, then guess what? We're gonna have conflicts with the police. I mean, I don't think the West Milford police would have actually really done anything, to be honest. But you have to simply be willing to take that risk, and the civil authority has a legitimate role. But the legitimate role of the civil authority, according to St. Paul in the scriptures in general, is the promotion of good and the punishment of evil.
Mm-hmm.
It is not the punishment of good and the promotion of evil. That's
which is what a lot of it. Which is
exactly.
What a lot of what
most
of
what happens
now
today is something like that. And the apostles said that we ought to follow God rather than men. So I mean, there were true Orthodox people who, even unfortunately, bishops who closed down their churches and such. I'm not saying that made them not be churches anymore, or that they had invalid sacraments because of that. I'm absolutely not saying that, but I'm just saying, we know where we stand on that.
Yeah, so, well, I mean, I understand. My big issue, and I think that it would be, I don't think this is unreasonable to say, is that if people did make that sort of mistake, that they just own up to it, and let it go, because they're going to try it again. We know that these governments are going to try this again with some other thing to attack with, but even if they do, it serves better for accountability for people to just, if they did screw up, just say, yeah, okay, we did. I mean,
you can't exist you can't adopt the attitude that the clergy and laity, the leadership of the church, has to always claim every single action they took was right and they never made a mistake.
It's not healthy.
Because that position of saying whatever the bishops just, I mean, look, it's not like this is overturning an ecumenical council or something like that.
Yeah.
It's nothing that crazy, but it's just it's a problem, and because it might not be COVID, it could be they claim, I don't know, terrorist, for fear of terrorist attacks, you have to close down the churches. It could be any such issue. So
let me see here. Rokarimroy, thoughts on Goark using multiple spoons during the vid? I was told by a friend who left Goark for Rokarim P that Alpha Duffers told clergy to use different spoons for each person who wants to commune.
Yeah, if you ever talk to Vladika Lazar, Bishop Lazaro Bibianco in Niagara, Canada, he knows a whole lot about that. He sent me a lot of videos over the years. And because it was a big issue in Canada of the ecumenical patriarchate clergy using like multiple. They would. Well, I think what he said they did was they would give like the communion, and then they take the spoon and dip it in rubbing alcohol right after.
Yeah, which
is a blasphemy. Obviously, I don't think they have real communion. So, I mean, but the intention obviously is what they're doing. So we're looking at, and so that was a common practice, of them doing that. And even though, as far as I know, I think that is basically something they invented.
Yeah.
Right? I cannot believe that was any predecessor practice of that whatsoever.
No, because even the base that's used for the blood is alcoholic. There's no need for that, to say the least. It's kind of redundant. I mean, I've read about people saying, okay, well, you could use vodka. People use wines to heal wounds, and a strong Greek wine is usually 17 to 21%. That's 42 proof. It will kill microbes. That said, this is an unprecedented practice. John MC writes, in 1945, everyone in Leningrad and Moscow knew that total capitulation of Germany was acknowledged on May 6th. That was Sunday of Pascha, and also St. George the Victory Bearer's Day. Pobeda Nosiets. Okay. And, see, 100 proof vodka. Yeah, that's, it was, there's no need for additional alcohol. There just wasn't. I don't know what that means. Okay.
All right. Anyway, so yes, the Greek Archdiocese, they did do that stuff. But what are you surprised at when you see? I mean, just in the ecumenical patriarchate at this point. So I'm not really surprised. But if you ever, I would whoever it was that made that comment about the vid and such, Roko Remnant. If he ever wanted to contact our Vladika Lazar, he has he knows a lot about all the stuff that happened like in Canada. Because he knows people in all those groups, and they told him, and it happened in America too. So,
All right. Okay. Well, I see Saba's joined the stream. Let's bring him on. Hold on. Okay, he's.
Yeah. Hello, everyone.
Good evening, Saba. How are you doing?
Well, it's Ezekiel. Unfortunately, Saba is not feeling well, so I'm just wanted to.
You're using his phone, or?
Yes, I'm using his phone at the moment. When we came onto the stream while we were traveling, I created a YouTube channel, a YouTube account in order to get into the StreamYard, but I unfortunately don't have access to any of that because I forgot to write down the correct information for it, so I don't remember it offhand. So Saba just used his phone.
Okay, well, what can we talk about today? You were at Father Boniface's last week, correct?
Yes, we were.
Okay. Tell us a little, how was that?
It was fantastic. It was absolutely fantastic. Father Boniface needed a lot of work done around the Hermitage. We did a few things. People in Discord will see the pictures and videos of the tree we cut down. And we did a few other things too, like I'm not sure yet. We managed to get it down, but it's extremely heavy. So
this is a palm tree, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, they get wide around the base if they're not taking. They become like almost like cacti almost. They kind of like those palms that you see at the top. They'll be all over the whole tree if it's not pruned properly.
So Ezekiel, did you use did you and Father Boniface use like an axe or a chainsaw? What did you do?
Well, we used a chainsaw and an axe for a bit. Then the chainsaw gave out, and we had to finish it off with the axe. So it was difficult, but we managed to get it, and it was actually pretty funny that we were helping to cut down a tree with Father Boniface. So, you know, that irony was not lost on me.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, that's great to hear. I'm glad to hear that you had a productive and positive visit with Father Boniface. Did you have any questions or comments for the show?
A few actually about Western Rite. While we were there, we did Vespers with Father Boniface, and I noticed how I'm with Sava and Broac, and I noticed it's very different from Eastern Rite, and I just wanted to learn a little bit more about it, like how, from the little I do know, I know that I believe it was Saint Tikhon who gave blessing to have Western Rite, but I don't really know much more about it. So anything you could tell me would be very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, okay, one of the major differences between the Matins, Vespers, and other services in the Eastern and Western services is that the psalms are distributed more evenly throughout the hours in Western services, whereas in Eastern services they have what are known as kathismas, which are like 20 different divisions of the psalms, and most of them are read at Matins and Vespers. So that's the biggest difference. I'm sure Bishop Enoch could give more of a description.
Well, what I would say is that if you want, I'm getting a little bit echo back. Okay. What I would say is that to look at the core, if you ever read the Rule of Saint Benedict, and you can find that anywhere online, in it he gives descriptions about how the divine office is done, and so that's basically what we do. So he gives the distribution of the psalms. He gives for vespers, for nocturnes, or for lauds, for prime, terce, sext, none, compline. And the structure of vespers consists of the invocation, which is "O God, be it," from Psalm 69, "O God, be attentive unto helping me, O Lord, make haste to help me," followed by the Gloria, or little doxology. "Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Ghost, as it was in the beginning, with now, and ever, to the ages of ages. Amen." Then for Vespers, there follows what are called, there were for monastic Vespers, there are 4 psalms. And the psalms all fall with each with a Gloria at the end of each psalm. And either all the psalms have, generally on like major feasts and on Sundays and other days, most of the psalms will have what's called an antiphon before and after the psalm. On some feasts, there's only one antiphon for all 4 psalms. And so antiphon is a short chant. Sometimes it's going to be rather long, that is sung. And then after that is what's called St. Benedict says, a chapter or capitula, which is a chanted portion from the point from a lectionary for the Holy Scriptures. It's generally like a verse, 1 or 2 verses. St. Benedict then says follows a responsory, which and then is followed by a hymn, which he calls Ambrosiana. And the hymns consist of, generally were first written by, they're hymns in the sense of they have like a certain amount of syllables. They follow a meter. St. Ambrose wrote a number of them. In fact, the Third Ecumenical Council quotes from the Nativity hymn that St. Ambrose wrote, or it's quoted, in the letter of Pope St. Celestine to the Third Council. It's in the Acts of the Council. So there's a hymn. In fact, the ferial hymns from Sunday through Friday, Sunday through Saturday, except for the first Vespers of Sunday hymn, are a lot of them are composed by St. Ambrose, and they follow the general days of the creation of the world. And so,
ferial being weekday hymns.
Ferial being weekdays. Now we're in Lent, so there are special hymns that are sung in Lent. All right, some were written by St. Ambrose, some by St. Hilary Portiers, and such. And so then St. Benedict says after that, there's a verse and response, which is a short exposition, a short verse from the scripture, then a response, then follows another antiphon, which is the antiphon on the Magnificat. Then the Magnificat is sung at Vespers, which is the song of Our Lady, "My soul doth magnify the Lord." and then it concludes, and then the antiphon is repeated. And during the antiphon, generally the altar and the church is censed and such. And on some special feasts, the antiphon is sung 3 times. It's sung before "My soul doth magnify the Lord," before the Gloria Patri, and then after the Gloria Patri. And then after that is what's called, St. Benedict orders the ninefold Kyrie. And then there's the Our Father is chanted out loud. And then there's followed what's called the collect, or the oration, which is the prayer that sums up the either that specific Monday or Tuesday. It's the general, if it's a regular ferial day, if it's a feast or some sort, or a special like in Lent, you do have specific psalm collects. Then there is a first called a first dismissal. Let us bless the Lord. Thanks be to God. Then follows a series of what's called commemorations, which, if there are multiple feasts that fall on the same day, then at that point there will be commemorations of those feasts that transpire. So you could theoretically have 5, 6, 7, 8 sets of commemorations, and commemoration consists of an antiphon, a verse in response, and a collect. And that's for like a Sunday or a major feast. If it's a ferial day or feast of 3 lessons, when there is prostration or kneeling, then there's a whole other set of things that transpire or can transpire. That's not spelled out in the Rule of St. Benedict, but it is spelled out in things like the Durham Collector, the Canterbury manuscript from like 1000 AD, the Regularis Concordia from 970. There is another version of the Regularis Concordia from 800 or so. And that has to do with what are called preces, which are verses and responses that happen after the Our Father and prior to the collect and such. And in Lent, oftentimes on certain days, if they're ferial days without a major feast intervening, there are prayers and prostration that transpire at the conclusion of Vespers and such. So, I mean, that's the basis. If you want to understand the basis of it, I would really recommend reading the Rule of St. Benedict, because he has several chapters where he goes through a lot of this in particular. If you want to go more into depth into it, if you ever get the chance, there is it may be on an Internet Archive for free, but there is a text called the Regularis Concordia, and Thomas Simmons translated it in the 1950s, and has Latin and English on one side. It was approved by the Synod of Winchester, and that gives further regulatory material and such. So the main reasons, of course, is that even though both like the East, like there are like multiple Western rites, but let's just say the Western Roman monastic rite, which is what we use, and the Constantinopolitan rite differed simply because they developed in 2 different places. There's probably this problem. I mean, they both follow the psalmody. I think there have been you can find general, if you actually really look, you begin to see sort of general similarities and such. But if I had to guess, probably sometime in the 4th or 5th century, gradual. I mean, for example, obviously they added in the hymns, the metrical hymns, which comes from St. Ambrose. All right. I don't think in the East there is some evidence that I think St. Romanus the Melodist, some of the early Kontakion he wrote, did follow sort of maybe a metered or even rhymed pattern in some of them. But that just simply never took off in the East, and it's not bad. It's just it was never a big thing there. So I guess a big part of it was that the divine office, as it was called, the hours in the West, consisted obviously of the Psalms, a hymn, and that that general structure. So you can probably, again, I would recommend reading the Rule of St. Benedict on the issue. He probably will give better clarity on that issue. So anyway.
I see. Okay. I have about 4 other questions that I would like to ask, and hopefully it wouldn't take too much time.
Is there any chance, if we're going to do that you can just stick around, because we have around 3 or 4 more questions, and then we can get back to your next question?
Yeah, of course,
Awesome.
please.
Okay. All right. So the first question that's popped up, and don't forget, you can always jump in just by clicking on the link in blue at the top of the chat box, and you can join in. But let's go through some of the questions we've gotten since. What is the church's stance on marijuana? I'm conflicted on it.
Well, I would say that using mind-altering drugs for recreational purposes is not a good idea. I'm just simply going to say we would be against it. If you have if you're like dying of cancer, or you have some sort of physical problem, that's sort of like, can you use opiates to control pain? All right. And generally, the church is not opposed to using opiates if it's for like pain control. But the problem is you get addicted on it.
Well,
or do you start smoke, or do you get the marijuana because you're claiming you have some sort of physical ailment, and then you just stay in your basement all day and smoke marijuana?
Yeah. Ultimately, it's. I mean, I hate to say this, but it kind of relates to the position on drunkenness. If you drink a glass of wine for dinner, that's good for you. If you're drunk all day, that's bad for you. It's all of these things, as you mentioned, that God created it, but men use that to sit on their butts. Well, men use all sorts of really good things that in a bad way. And so
I know a lot of people will talk about THC oil, which is derived from the marijuana plant.
Well, CBD oil is the same.
Oil? Is that what
THC is the hallucinogen.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And that stuff is, they sell in Colorado, they sell that concentrated to 91%. It sends people to the ER.
Okay, well, that's obviously not good.
Yeah, so I mean, if you get, like, if a doctor recommends it for anxiety, things like that, and you're using it in where you're not like sitting around all day, then I would say that there's probably a positive to it. But again, the local laws apply, things like that. So I mean, if you're using it for a genuine medicinal purpose, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, but I emphasize we should emphasize genuine medicinal purpose.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
just like
painkillers. The whole opiate epidemic started out with people requesting the doctors being encouraged to prescribe these for people who had genuine problems, and then it just intentionally was put out of control. So.
Okay, and let me see here. The next question: how does Western Rite True Orthodoxy compare to World Orthodoxy? In World Orthodoxy, it really seems it's purely a humanism machine. Yeah, they're like night and day. I mean, I know it seems like I know, like, Vladika, you do a lot of studies in the liturgics, and you see it on paper, but you've also seen YouTube videos of what they actually do, and it bears so little resemblance even to what we do, just because of the fact that they will throw in all the hokey Roman Catholic things like the adoration and the organs and the.
You have to remember within World Orthodoxy, we're really talking about the Antiochians, and then to some real quick,
because the Russians are almost gone now.
Yeah, that's closing down, obviously, but gradually. Within the Antiochians, remember, I think they took in originally the Father Alexander Turner group in like 1955.
Yeah, the Basilians. Yeah.
Yes, and he used this modified Tridentine rite, and they still retain things like the major elevation after the words of institution, and they still maintain things. I think they had adoration of the Blessed Sacrament or something like all those things, and their attitude. And then later they introduced Anglican liturgics in 1977. This is because I think their attitude was one in which they claimed that they were just going to use whatever the Roman Catholic Church had used prior to them joining. Because the view was that was, I don't know why, but for some reason they considered that legitimate tradition. Of course, as we understand as Orthodox, and even if you're not Orthodox, the Vatican every 40 to 50 years changes its legitimate tradition. The Vatican basically did major damage to their old breviary system back in the 1880s.
Yeah.
Right. Even if you want to look at like older pre-1890 breviaries, you need to look at the old Marcadia Butte's translation of the breviary, or even ours. Ours is an older one too for monastic usages. The Vatican in the 1700s, and then again through various violent, extreme means in 1890 abolished the blessing of Epiphany water. Now they allowed a lesser blessing to be used, but the old blessing that had the immersion of the cross, they got rid of that because they claimed it was like a Greek Easternization in the Western Rite or something, like, even though it had been used since like the 7th century. This is kind of absurd when they're doing that. They basically changed the Holy Week service. Anyway, my point is that that's their attitude and their ideology behind it. And it's an ideology that, for whatever reason, they claim the Congregation of Sacred Rites of the Vatican before 1955, had legitimate grounds for. And our Orthodox position is that no, we don't accept anything decision they made. Our decision has to be based on what did the Western Rite Orthodox saints before the schism do. All right, and we have fairly well documented evidence about how the things they did.
Okay.
Especially the fact with things like elevation. After the Wards Institution, that was in fact introduced in the 12th century to combat the older so-called archaic theory that viewed either the whole canon or the Surplices Te Regamus as consecratory. That was the reason they introduced that and such. So I think it really had more to do with maybe there were some people who had some genuine missionary concerns back in the 50s, maybe. Though I can tell you, ultimately it played into humanism, especially with the Anglican stuff. So that's why we're always very opposed to that, and we always react very extreme when anybody tries to say they want to do something like that, because that's simply contrary to the precism Western Rite, which is what we do.
And let me see here. And then we have one more question, and then we'll get back to Ezekiel. And then we have another question after that. So give me one moment. And that one is, we have answered this. I'm going to be real quick about this, DTC. In the New Western Rite prayer book, the one that I put together, that is based on the one that Bishop Enoch and I did, no, there is no Typica yet, because that is designed for weekly services. I will say that we do have a how to use Typica for members on nftu.net. I'm not sure if you're a member. Reach out to me in chat and Discord, and I'll give you access to that. So it's actually a video showing you how to actually do it along with the wording. Dimitri said, I saw what Rocor Western Rite wedding with icons of Thomas Aquinas and Therese of Lisieux. Nothing surprises me at this point. Nonocent says, I don't use it anymore. Okay. Favorite saints? I like the apostles and the pillars of orthodoxy. I like the really big saints and my patron saint. It's a strange question. Like, I don't have a personal attachment. The closest I would say is probably my patron saint, and I don't think people have. I don't know. I don't think this through. It's not like I don't collect lives like, I guess, like baseball cards or stuff. Or let me see here. Yep, I think that basically sums up all our streams. Okay, so Ezekiel, what was your next question? And then we're going to get to Baptiste Robin.
Sure. My next question was about how to read the Gregorian notation. It looks very different to what I'm used to with like normal notation.
The question
Yes. So I was wondering if there was any like tutorials that you know of that could help me learn how to read it.
There are. I know Father Boniface might have access to some. I know I've sent some in the past. But I would suggest Googling how to read Gregorian chant. If you are formally trained in how to read regular standard notation, it's actually very simple. It's a simplification of regular notation, and you'll find that it's actually
regular notation derives from the Gregorian notation.
Exactly.
We have a 4-staff line. They have a 5-staff. Like, for example, I never learned to read. Ezekiel, can you mute yourself for a second so we don't have the reverb? Okay. Like, I never learned to read the original music. In terms of like regular music, I just
standard notation.
Yeah. When I learned music, I learned at the monastery the Gregorian chant, because like the notes go from bottom to up. So if you see 2 notes, so it's like one block note, and then above it is another block note. Okay. It goes from like if you know what I'm trying to say, it goes. That's how I have to look at it. Technically, each note is supposed to be like there are two schools of thought that go back probably to like the 10th, 9th century. You can even find books that talk about this, about how to properly sing it, whether each note should be kind of sung with the same amount of time on it. And I mean, it would probably be too long, and I'm not the greatest expert on it, but I can guarantee you could probably hundreds of web pages that talk about this and hundreds of videos, and there are a number of books and recordings to help out with it and such. I mean, if you ever visited the monastery here, we could probably help a bit and such, but
Oh, okay. All right. Well, Ezekiel, so I'm glad that you had that question. There's another question in the chat, and George has just joined the chat. So once we go through around there, we'll get to the third question. George, welcome to the program. How are you? George? Hi, George. If you are there, if you could unmute yourself and introduce yourself. Okay, George. Hold on. George, can you unmute yourself, please? If anyone has talked to George here, please unmute yourself so that we can continue the show. All right. If not, I mean, if you want, you can come back on. The invite link is still there. Just I'm going to give you like 30 seconds, George, and then I'll have to move to the next thing.
Do we want to answer?
Very good, Father. How are you?
Oh, okay. There he is. How are you doing, George? Yes. What was your question, George?
Sorry about that. I'm very well.
Well, I'd be glad.
I think we're lagging. I'm good deal here.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a little bit of a lag. Just be patient with it. But what was your question or comment?
How about now? How's it going now?
Perfect. It's good. So, how can we help you today? George?
Okay. He might be trying. He might come back on. I've had the same problem. Let's go through the other questions.
Okay, so then the next question was from Robin Baptiste, or Baptiste Robin. I don't know which it is. Do you know the reasons why the Evlogian schism has gone back to the Moscow Patriarchate? I think it is, I remember it is a link to the deposition of Jean of Dubna or Caryopoulos. I assume
this is the Paris Exarchate he's referring
to. Right, I believe he's referring to the Paris Exarchate.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All I know is they did. I don't know the whole, the whole situation altogether. I mean, if you want to look up like the whole Paris Exarchate, there's probably a lot of information on the internet about it. So.
Yeah, I would definitely, since it's fairly recent, I would definitely look that one up using a search engine.
Because a lot of that involves like the post-revolutionary history, Row Corps back in the 20s and the 30s and such like that. There's a lot of info on that. So. Okay.
Let me see here, and then also he said maybe you have some information on what happened between Lecouf, the Catholic Orthodox Church of France, started by Saint John Maximovich, and the Evlogian schism. Mm-hmm. I struggle finding. I don't know that these two were really that related.
Well, I mean, I know a little bit more about Lecouf than I do about the Paris Exarchate.
Why? Yeah, but I don't think they were connected ecclesiastically.
No, because well. What's true is Lecouf started out back in the his predecessor groups were like 2 or 3 groups that came out in the 30s that joined together. They did get taken in by the Moscow Patriarchate like in 1948 or 50 or something like that. They around 1955, I think, is when they formally joined Row Corps. They left the Moscow Patriarchate. And they were put under the patronage of St. John Maximovich. And he basically got them to adopt the Orthodox Paschalion. A lot of things were like allowed in the Moscow Patriarchate they shouldn't have. Like they were allowed to give communion to Roman Catholics and things like that. And, that was obviously an issue. So he had to say, no, we can't do this. They have to use the old calendar. They have to use the Orthodox Pascalian. I think by 1960, they had basically fixed most of those issues, at least on the surface. And I think ultimately the problem they had is their only real patron was St. John Maximovich. And part of the problem, the other problem was that Lyakov, I think, they were fine in seeing themselves as sort of the restoration of an Orthodox Church of Gaul or France. That's fine. The problem is many of them try to use that as an excuse to try to promote like the new calendar.
Yeah.
And St. John had to like shoot those things down. And and it didn't help that they were basically not always cooperating with him, even if they said they were doing certain things. So when St. John reposes, it's only a matter of time with these issues with them start to come back, because St. John's not there. I mean, he was there kind of teaching them and pressing on them to do what they should do, and I think they were more or less doing it when he was alive. And then after he reposes, then obviously the majority of the Rokor didn't really want them there. It did not help the fact that they were trying to argue they wanted to go back to the new calendar and all this other stuff. That did not help their case. Then I think Michel Vitali or Archbishop Vitali of Toronto or something, Montreal, it was another Vitali, Maximento, I believe, told them that they have to use Eastern Rite, and that more or less caused them to leave Rokor. And
then they ended up
they joined the Romanian Patriarchate for a time, and Bishop Theophan Ionescu was involved with them because he left Rokor, and I think he had originally been the co-consecrator for Bishop
Akakius Papa.
No, well, yes, but he also helped St. John Maximovich in 1966 consecrate Bishop Jean Kovalevsky, who was the basically only Lyakov bishop. And then I think Jean Kovalevsky, I think that was he and Theophan Ionescu did another consecration like in 1975 of this later bishop. He's an Englishman who was a Lyakov bishop. I can't remember his name at the moment. But I think their problem was that they, it's the same issue that happened in Rokor with sort of like the Bulgarian or the Romanian one, that there was too much a pull for them to be one of the mainstream or to be want to be accepted. And this ultimately did end their capacity for, manifesting proper, change and things like that. And Lyakov basically at this point, is basically just as liberal as the Romanian Patriarchate or the Ecumenical Patriarchate and such. And their strategy at this point is still to try to establish some sort of communion with them and such.
Okay, now I see that.
So obviously that's not a good thing, and that's obviously Okay.
I see that Baptiste Robin has a second follow-up question, but we are going to go to Sava's. To Ezekiel's question, third question now, and then I think we can get back to finishing up with Baptiste Robin's question and go from there.
Yeah. First, I wanted to apologize. I didn't realize I did have the phone turned up quite a bit, so I'm very, very sorry if there was any feedback. I didn't realize that might have been the case. And my next question was, and if you'd had answered this before, I apologize, but this is just for my own curiosity. What drove you and Ladika Enoch to choose the saint names that you did?
Well, in my case, it was the priest who catechized me. He asked my name. I said my name was Joseph. He said, "Oh, like Saint Joseph of Petrograd." And I realized he was a new martyr, and I wanted to learn more about him. And I said, "Sounds good to me."
In my case, we used to have an elderly priest named Father Brendan, and he couldn't really do a lot, but he was like in his bed most of the time, and I would go into and help him like clean up his room and read the Bible to him and the Church Fathers. And we talked a lot about, like, we would read through the Bible commentaries of the Fathers on the Scriptures. Like, we would read through the Holy Scriptures like 3 or 4 times a year, and we would read through patristic commentaries. And we oftentimes would read one of the interesting things he was interested, and I was interested in, was the patristic explanations of the end times, and what was really patristic, what wasn't. And one of the two figures that keep recurring are Enoch and Elias, the prophets Enoch and Elias. And Father Brendan had dedication for years to the prophet Elias. He had icons, the prophet Elias, and such. And that, kind of gave me the impetus to study the prophet Enoch. And I guess really by studying, the end times patristic teachings or the scriptures, I was attracted to the character of the prophet Saint Enoch. And I mean, that's basically, how it was, so.
Okay, so then we're going to get to Ezekiel's fourth question once we answer the next one from Baptiste Robin, which is, have we got these documents on the calendar between St. John and Ecole?
I have them somewhere. I've seen them several times before. They used to be this claim that St. John promoted the new calendar among the French Orthodox. That's not true. I think there is, in fact, a translated Roquefort document from 1960 where St. John says, no, they are using the old calendar and the Orthodox Paschalion. Now, if there were Laekov people at that time secretly not doing it, which may be the case, that was done strictly against, their rules. Although, of course, the problem was that the Roquefort, even at that time, allowed there to be like Romanian and Bulgarian new calendar parishes, even though they had to do the Orthodox Paschalion and such. But I'll try to find. I can maybe next program, if we have a next program. Yeah, I'll.
God willing, yeah. All right, awesome. In that case, before we get to to Ezekiel's on Sava's phone's fourth question, let me see here. Maroon Blue said, the YouTube gods sent our only begotten channel to grace the presence of Vegan Gains video last night. Okay, well, to clarify, there are obviously no gods in YouTube. There is only God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. You're talking about YouTube algorithms, but in fact, I do sometimes follow what Vegan Gains has occasionally does, and that particular new video that he released about a carnivore diet is the opposite extreme of veganism. In my sense, that's just as ridiculous, and the reasons that the guy gave were terrible. So that's why I made my comment. You don't pick your diet based on what you like. You pick your diet based on what's good for you and what's based on the fast. And Ezekiel, fourth question time.
Yes. My last one is more of a comment, actually. I wanted to thank everyone in the Metropolitan, especially Father Boniface, for coming down there. He was very, very, very gracious. And
I think he lives there.
Yes. Well, at the moment, he doesn't live in the Hermitage.
The house, yeah, right. He has. He's still moving. I know.
Right. Well, obviously, I wanted to thank him for that, and I also wanted to thank Father Mark. And one last thing, if anyone in the audience would like to send their greetings to Father Boniface, he really enjoys when people from all over the world call him or send their greetings or different things like that. He's
he has a
right
website.
now he doesn't have any parishioners, so he really enjoys the encouragement. So
yeah, well, it is a hermitage, and hopefully it grows. If you want to reach out to him, you can always reach out using his website, stpaulhermitage.com, which also has his phone number and email if you want to reach him directly.
Well, I think this is also a wider point. A lot of true Orthodox are in isolated. Now, not as many as people would have you believe, and a lot of World Orthodox are also themselves isolated, by the way. But we've dealt even today, Father Joseph, with a case of a man who's preparing for baptism, and his worry was that, I'm going to be 4 hours away from getting the church.
Yeah.
And we explained that, look, we can work this, and it worked out. Well, we can work this out. This is not an uncommon situation in history. And by the way, my situation, I remember when I was 18 back in 2002, 22 years ago, is a lot worse because I lived in North Carolina. And the options for true Orthodox in North Carolina in 2002 were zero. I mean, there may have been something later formed and such, but there wasn't really much. And it was just, one, problem after another. If you're living in the northeast of the United States, Pennsylvania and up, you actually have a lot more opportunities for finding true Orthodox places.
Yeah, just
And finding
applied
us
patience.
among other
Yeah,
true Orthodox. So
yeah,
you have
just
to have patience, as we said, and greet like as Ezekiel said, sending greetings to somebody, whether they're a priest or a layperson, or keeping in contact with them, does do a lot to help that person, and they feel like it can help relieve their isolation and such. So that's why I always recommend to keep in contact with our other clergy and our other people as much as possible. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Ezekiel, thank you for that. And did you want? I know that you wanted to talk about the trip. I think that's something that we can do either next week, etc. But did you have anything else you wanted to plug or promote or discuss?
Well, not exactly. Excuse me. Not exactly promote. More like a question for either you, Vladika Enoch, or the audience. Me and Sava would really like to go and visit other places when we have a chance. So, if anybody has any suggestions of, like while we were in Lakeland, we went to go see what was the Greek church we went to? What was the name? The Holy Dormition, yes. Yeah,
Okay.
the Holy Dormition in Clearwater. So it was a beautiful church, and it was the largest true Orthodox church I had ever seen. So I'd really like to go and visit other ones if I had the chance. So if anybody has any suggestions.
Have you visited Vladika Irenaeus in Texas?
No, I haven't actually. This was actually the first time I visited another true Orthodox church.
Well,
he has a very nice church in Texas.
Yes, he's in Austin, correct?
Liberty Hill, I believe.
Liberty Hill. That's right outside of Austin, and he is the bishop for the Avlona Synod, which is our sister synod in North America. So I would recommend, if you ever get the chance to visit him, he's a great bishop, and you would have much to talk about. And again, other places, if you ever go into Canada, and you could ever call ahead and talk to our Bishop Lazar in Niagara. I'm sure he would be glad, visit you. He has Hermitage, and if you call ahead for a few days, I'll be more than welcome to visit here. I need time to take my my extra pain medicine and to drink a few cups of coffee, because otherwise I'm going to be in terrible shape unless I do that. So
I see. Okay, well, I look forward to that. I should be done with school pretty soon, so hopefully I'll have more time to travel. And hopefully Sava will be able to put up with me again for another trip. So, but thank you very much for the invitation. I look forward to seeing you in person.
Okay, just give me a few days ahead of time. So,
of course, yes, sure.
All right.
Well, thank you very much, Ezekiel. You have a great night. Master bless.
Yes, Master bless.
God bless. The Lord bless.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've got questions rolling in. Baptiste Robbins is more of a comment than a question, and it basically of what I've heard. Bishop Germain of Paris got married and scared the Romanian Patriarchate, which is hardly afraid on a canonical subject, and they stopped recognizing Lakov. That's pretty accurate.
That's actually what happened. And to bring up the Lakov situation, it's such a wasted opportunity of what happened.
It really is.
That they had so much given to them from St. John Maximovich. There was so much work put into it. And the ultimate choice they made was to go down the route of trying to be like everybody else. And you're right. They weren't Western. They were Western right. Okay. So they technically weren't like everybody else, but their mentality became like everyone else.
Yeah.
And they never were able to give that up. And this is sort of the tragedy that of people like that. You could be given gifts by saints, and the priesthood by the church, obviously, and it ultimately is never fully utilized, and it falls away, and it's just a terrible thing. That's how I think of it, as just great waste.
Well, I see George is back, so hopefully, if he can hear us, welcome back. Hey, George.
Hi, Father. Can you hear me this time?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Wonderful. Forgive me. I would ask the blessing, but I don't know that that's appropriate.
Okay, well then, God bless you. I'll bless you without you asking.
So, if you don't mind, I give a little bit of backstory. So I, for those of you who know me from the Discord, I am currently in World Orthodoxy, as it's called.
Okay, you're the George with the number, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Now, I asked this question yesterday, and I kind of reposted it or did something to ask it again because I never got a clear response. And this time it was I was reminded of the question because I was reading some website called True Orthodoxy.
The one from Gregorian, Colorado. Hello.
Familiar with as heretics.
You're really you're buffering a lot, so you're breaking up. Try to pop out and pop back in with the same device if possible. Okay, now we're not hearing anything. If you can still hear me, just try to just jump off and jump back in. And we're taking calls, and feel free to use the link at the top of the chat, comment, or take or make the comments in the chat as well. But yeah, hopefully George comes back. He seems to be having technical issues. Number 9 says, I know the Holy Synod of Milan had bishops in, obviously, Milan, as well as Turin. Would there have been any interesting ramifications as if an Orthodox see had been restored to Rome? I will say that in the heyday of the Milan Synod, they actually did talk about that possibility. If I remember correctly, okay, well, George is back, so I'm going to put him on the stage, but we're going to finish up on this question. Basically, that question had been breached a couple of times. I believe it was one of our bishops we had of Ostia, and Ostia is considered one of the Roman dependencies, if you look at the history of the see. That said, I don't think anyone trying to elect a bishop in Rome would be completely successful unless it's in the outskirts in a small village. It's not the infrastructure wasn't there to protect the unfortunate person who would be given that cross, or B. But I mean, it's been thought of many times. Yeah, it pops up every so often. But did you want to add anything to that, Vladika? Or
no. I mean, I think it probably wouldn't have been that helpful at the time. So, I mean, oftentimes we're just trying to survive. So,
yeah. All right. So George is back. So let's see if we can get you on the stream and you can ask the questions. From what I heard before you started breaking up, you were asking about the trueorthodoxy.org website, but more specifically, what were you asking?
Okay, so I'm going to make it really quick while I have connection. So the reason I brought that website up is it condemned your synod, I believe. They condemned Hocknut, condemned the Matthew.
They condemn every synod except themselves.
Right, exactly. Now the thing is even among the people they condemn, though, you have various groups who have no mutual communion. I don't think you would disagree.
You don't think I would what?
Very.
Okay. Is it just me, or is George really hard to hear because it keeps breaking up? I feel like it might just maybe it's just me. Okay. Vladika, can you hear George?
No, I can't.
Okay, I just don't want to make sure.
There's sort of this. You can hear the sort of distortion where it goes in and out a little bit. He might just type the question.
Yeah.
George. Maybe
if you have a computer connection, that might work better. But if he can talk, it's fine.
Yeah, if you have an like a hardwired connection, etc. Yeah, that would be better. George. Okay.
How about this? I'll just type the question.
We'll take it. Yeah, okay, that's fine. That'll work great. All right. Yeah, no problem,
Okay,
George.
thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, God bless.
All right, so we're waiting on his question. Let's continue on. And somebody asks, I'm not sure if I was correctly baptized in the Greek Archdiocese. If I'm baptized into true Orthodoxy because of this, do I pick a new patron? I've always felt guilty because when I was younger, I just chose mine because it sounded cool. It depends on why you'd be choosing a new patron. If it doesn't sound cool anymore, maybe you should keep it. I mean, the point is that if you feel like not, I mean, the question is why you feel disconnected. Do you just want to go back to what was your like a saint related to your secular name, etc.? We're welcoming Carl on. So yeah, you can, but the question is whether you should. That's really going to be something personal. I would discuss it with your priest. Okay, and we have Carl and we have Father Boniface.
Good evening, fathers.
Okay, good evening. How's it going? God bless
It's going
you.
well. So my question, I've been reading this, I guess you could say it's a secular, sort of ecclesiastical history that deals with, it's called the History of Western Political Thought. It's by a couple of, I believe, Anglican brothers. Both have the last name Carlisle, and this came out. Oh, you know that one. Good.
I've read parts of it on Internet Archive and Google Books.
Yes.
Yeah.
So his contention, I think it's A.J. Carlisle. Arthur, I think, is the main author.
Is it called? Are you sure it's not the history of medieval political thought or something?
I'm sorry. Yes, you're exactly right. So it is Western, but that it is entitled medieval.
Yes, Robert Carlyle and Alexander Carlyle.
Sorry, yeah, I'm getting it all wrong. But you do know the book, so that's amazing. So he's arguing in that there are two major places that political authority is founded in the Western intellectual tradition, and one is he says in the people, and that is the patristic authority, and also the Stoics. So the Stoics and the patristics agree that it's founded in the people, and then in between there's the other tradition that says, I guess, that God vests authority in the ruler. So if I'm going to jump off, but if you guys could please give the standard Orthodox interpretation, which I guess might rely on symphonia powers, something like that.
I'm just checking through the book. I'd have to read the whole, because if he's saying something like the Church Fathers said that the people have political authority and all power comes from the people, I would have to disagree. I don't sense that I'd have to see what quotations he's using to justify that.
Yeah, I mean, it is nuanced, and he has a lot. Obviously, they cite lots and lots of stuff, and they see disagreements in the fathers and basically all throughout history.
I'd have to read the book again.
Yeah.
I mean, I do look at here. There is some. If he's talking about, in the case of just the Lex Regia, okay. There was this idea in Roman political thought that the Lux Regia was conveyed by the Senate on the ruler. But I still think even like the Roman Senate, all right, would have, even in their pagan phase, would have believed that their power derived from like Jupiter or the Roman polytheistic system. So even if the people represent like the Senatus Populusque, or the Senate people of Rome, even if they have political authority, that was something that was gifted to them. Now, now you can find figures like Saint Gregory the Great has this famous letter, and I can't quite. It's maybe like in two of his epistles, where Saint Gregory the Great says something like, "A king is the master of servants, while the emperor is the lord of free men." So there was sort of this understanding that the kings of the nations, as they would have explained it, are different than the Roman emperor. So, I mean, I can't give you much more than that. I can't imagine the Church Fathers. I'd have to see which one she's talking about. Thought that, people had the authority came from people, as opposed, because even the Roman polytheistic religion would have thought the authority came from the pagan gods. Even if the people exercised it, it was delegated from the gods. Yeah. And I would have to assume also during the time of Justinian that they probably had some concept, like even St. Gregory would have this concept that the emperor's authority, once it is conferred, all right, it can't be taken back. So even if through the mechanism of the Roman Senate they adjudicate who is the proper emperor, all right, that authority is still ultimately from God. So I mean, let me read through this section, and then maybe like next week you can call back and
Yeah,
go back.
I'll take some notes and I'll try to come back next week and present something firm, because like I said, I've been reading it, but I didn't take any notes. So okay, thank you, fathers, for your time.
I think it's chapter 6, the source of political authority. I'll have to read through that again.
Okay, thank you. I'll see you next week. Good night.
Okay, right, thanks.
Okay, God bless. Okay, hello, Father Boniface.
Hello.
Welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good.
We're getting questions and answers nonstop now. This is crazy. All right. So let me see here. What were your thoughts on the weekend? I know we had Ezekiel on, and Father, Saba and Ezekiel were there. How did that go for you? We've all seen a couple of pictures of you guys chopping a tree.
Yeah, I haven't seen them, but it was great. And those guys are a couple of workhorses, and we got a lot done. I got a fence in the backyard put up. It's 90% finished. In other words, a privacy fence, and so we put that up. We got I power washed the house, and then they helped me put putting a coat of sealer on the block, and then they did some painting, on the gables and soffits, and then some yard work, a fair amount of yard work. We took down a tree, and then they leveled out some ground, and then initiated some things which will happen later. So, and then I tell you what, though. So, with all that work that was done, we also went out on First Friday to Mullen Park in the city, and from my perspective, it was one of the best nights ever. I'm of course wearing my cassock, and there was one fellow that I've been talking to for maybe 2 years. So I obviously have transitioned from the old Catholic Church into the Orthodoxy or over the last few years. But and so we had a nice talk with him, and then people came up to me, and then and so I'm there with Saba and Ezekiel, and so whenever someone would come up, they engaged all three of us. And
wow.
Yeah, and so in other words, we had a lot of good conversation with three men who love Orthodoxy, and so we were able to, as a unity, give a lot of good thought to these people and encouragement, and so seeds were sown, and as a matter of fact, I did contact one of the contacts to meet him, set up a time where we can meet together, sooner or later. And so I'm hoping that will come to fruition. And so really one of the key aspects that needs to happen is for me to get that house, readied up and get that chapel workable. And so that's the probably one of the biggest things that needs to get done. So we're getting there, but aside from that, it was just great and very encouraging to have them come for a visit, and to hear the response of people all over the world per se, and then it's very encouraging, very encouraging. So I look forward to more of the same.
Glory to God. That's great.
Glory to God for that, and that's
Amen.
That's wonderful to hear. And so let me think here. So we've got lots of questions still going on. Hold on. And let me get let's see here. Let's get back to this. So this one's a bit of a frustrating question. And I will explain why. We get up to not this one. We did that one. What are some old calendar saints that were great? Hezekiah had a lot of miracles. World Orthodox say, but look at the miracles, not counting shared saints with World Orthodoxy if possible, maybe lesser known people. at times, eventually it becomes a bit of an exercise in reductionism. One of the holiest saints of the 20th century, St. John of Shanghai and San Francisco, St. John Maximovich, is what we consider our saint. He was true Orthodox. He supported the true Orthodox, so on and so forth. If we can't count him because he shares something with World Orthodox, even though they were calling him a schismatic until 15 years ago, it's a game we can't win. The truth of the matter is, true Orthodox people and saints, people ranging from everyone from St. John Maximovich to Father Seraphim Rose, to the martyric leaders of the Greek Church, etc. I mean, if you can't, our own Elder Theodore, the examples that we have, if those aren't enough because somehow a World Orthodox can claim them, then we have nobody. The truth is we have everybody because we're maintaining the deposit of faith that they had. So the fact that World Orthodox, how do I put this? They venerate them. It's like Uniates venerating St. Mark of Ephesus. Sure, you could say you're doing it, but you don't believe what he believes. I hope that helps. Roka Remnant asks, I have a question that is not directed at any synod. How do we spot the development of an elder cult? What do we do if we're stuck in one, and how to get out of one? I will say the biggest way out of an elder cult that I have seen, in all honesty, is to keep talking to more Orthodox people. Eventually, enough of them will set you straight by pointing out certain things that they're saying that are weird and off. It seems like a lot of these online elder types will generally have some, what's the word I'm looking for? They'll have some divergence from orthodoxy, some little shtick that they've got going that they think makes them sound more special, but actually makes them sound a little more like a heretic. I would say if you're not, if this elder or whoever it is for stuff, I would be very nervous at anyone who calls themselves elder in the 21st century. But ultimately, if they're saying something that deviates from orthodoxy, that's a red flag. And if other people notice it, that's God trying to tell you, maybe you should reconsider.
Another thing to notice is elder cults, if they're really genuine elder cults, when the elder dies or some scandal happens, if he's like the head of a jurisdiction, or it all explodes. Like Hockney, it blew up. It literally blew up overnight in historical terms.
Yeah.
When Pantaleimon admitted, I did this stuff.
Yeah, we went from 35 years, it collapsed within a month and a half.
Yeah, combined with the Imaslavi and the Sleeper Awake stuff, it was just all within like a year or 2 year period. Because it showed you that the majority, whatever problems you have, the vast majority of those clergy and laity, they were not in there because of Father Pantaleimon.
Yeah.
Right? They thought they were in there for true orthodoxy. And if it turned out that others had other ideas and had this elder cult around him, then you see what happens. All right.
Yeah.
So elder cults generally don't continue. They just simply disintegrate over some sudden occurrence and things like
that. It's worth noting. And I love pointing this out in the, I don't know if you I'm sure you're familiar with the Brothers Karamazov, but the point is, one thing that is noted is that the elders' body begins to stink, but it was as a warning to the people, and the people become kind of deluded and start following somebody else who was condemning him. So elder cults by their nature are personality driven. Orthodoxy as a whole should be consensus driven by the unanimous answer of the church. So I hope that helps. Just as I said,
it's like again, if you have a genuine elder cult, when the elder dies, the thing disintegrates. Yep. If it doesn't, then there's already a healthy system in place. Even though you may have a figure who's an abbot or an archbishop or a metropolitan who is extremely venerated, influential because he's a saintly man, that's not the same as an elder cult. We have to distinguish that. Yep. Right?
All right, and so Maroon Blue says, thanks, Father Sweden, for rolling with humor and clarifying your stance. Not a problem. Roka Remnant says, you might see me and Sava later this year, Vladika Enoch.
Excellent. Great.
Okay. Paul Antonio says, yes, Archbishop Gregory's page. I see that George has put his question in, so we are going in order. Orthodoxia y Thanatos says, did apostolic succession end with MP only because of surgery making them lose grace, or also because all of the canonical bishops died or were martyred? Well, they didn't all die and were martyred. So many of them were in jail and just didn't go with them. If I remember, Sergius's that synod that they made him a patriarch and made new bishops. Weren't there like 4 or 7 whole bishops that they managed to get coerced and nobody else would sign?
I think originally in 42, 43, they brought out 16 bishops out of prison.
Okay,
in total. No, I was 14. I think they brought out of prison. About 2 of
Yeah.
them, Sergius. It was made before that. It was Sergius and maybe 2 other bishops.
Yeah,
Were consistently not in prison. The others would go in and out. So even when they joined the Moscow, even when they joined Sergius, it rarely protected them.
Yeah.
So obviously we would consider Sergius to have my own view. Obviously, is the witnessism. Obviously, you found people even in the 60s who disagreed with that. You know, you have that famous case of Archbishop Leonti of Chile telling Father Lazar. Father Lazar, his last name I can't remember. He later became Archbishop Lazar, telling him,
Zherbenko.
Yeah, Zherbenko telling him to go to Archbishop Harmogen or something, who was like the most anti-Sergius of the MP bishops, and get ordained by him. What I'm not endorsing that was basically what some people talked, and you know that, but it seems to have been that whatever that there was 2 schools of thought. One was that the MP had simply ceased to be a church completely. And you figure there was one guy who wrote a book in Jordanville, I can't remember his name, called "Is There Grace in the Soviet Patriarch?"
That's I.M. Andreev.
And his view was that he was skeptical of it, but he thought maybe God had allowed something for people. And then there was another view, like Archbishop Leonti of Chile and others, which seemed to be that some of them were, what have you. And then you have Archbishop Lazar Zherbenko's view, which seemed to be held by some of these others, was that they did have a view that it had technically valid sacraments. But what happened is after the Soviet Union collapsed, more or less, those who held that view, they were under siege for right reasons. Because after the Soviet Union collapsed, you can't claim anybody's persecuting these MP bishops and stopping them.
Right.
So at that point, your responsibility for everything goes way up. So the result is you see by 2014, like Orthodox said, look, it's no longer feasible to accept that there's even theoretically valid sacrament, like graceful sacraments in the MP. I think Roac by that time had made a similar decision and such. So, I'm sorry. That's basically the general answer if you want to have like a broad historical view. So,
okay. Let me see here. So no, that I would say that sounds pretty accurate. Eventually, that synod eventually did make its own succession, etc. Let me see here. I read that Metropolitan Bessarion from Romania was the head of the Croatian Orthodox Church that collaborated with Eustachi.
No, it's not Bessarion. It's the one who was made head of the Croatian. You remember the one like in World War II? That was Metropolitan Germanus, I believe, who had been a Row Corps bishop, and he was made head of this organization. And obviously that's controversial to say the least. I think Row Corps censored him, and they said he's not part of us anymore.
Yeah,
such.
All right. Let's see. That's a compromise. It's always great to see Carl strolling outside. Okay, Matthew Hamstein George here. How can it be said that true Orthodoxy is one, holy, Catholic, and apostolic when there is not a single communion? Romanians are in communion with no one. GOCK does not commune with Milan, etc. The problem with this argument is that it presupposes that unity is the standard as opposed to whether or not unity is the goal. And what I mean by that is that unity in faith has to be based on actual unity in faith. Once deviations begin to occur, the impetus and the blame on who causes the schism is on the innovators. So, to put it simply, take the Church of Greece before the calendar change. The people who maintain the tradition maintained unity with all the generations before them. It was the innovators who created the disunity. Now, granted, in that situation of persecution, we use the Russians in this case as well as an example. They, because the kind of the basic institutions of unity that people were used to were taken over by heretics. That doesn't mean that the heretics are suddenly not guilty of the division because the Orthodox are divided. Because of that, it means that all those Orthodox together, even though they are not in communion with each other, which they should be, and eventually they do, and that's what happens over time, that they would represent the church because they're representing the teaching of Orthodoxy. So the point is, it's not like when you're pointing fingers at the little groups, etc., you're pointing from a perspective, and the perspective is from the position of the innovators. But they're the reason for the division to begin with.
I'd also say you have to look at this historically, because if I know this argument is that unless you claim one true Orthodox group is the only true jurisdiction and all the other true Orthodox are heretics or schismatics, then you're promoting like some neo form of ecumenism. And I usually encountered that years ago on Facebook from Kiriakite Matthewites. However, they could never respond to historical cases. And the most prominent that I remember, I remember doing this years and years ago was to bring up the death of Saint John Chrysostom. So Saint John Chrysostom gets deposed, falsely deposed, and the Western bishops, all of the Western bishops, basically say they broke communion with those who did the deposition. Well, then Saint John Maximovich dies in exile, and then the Orthodox Western bishops say we are not going to have communion with any Eastern bishops because they all, except for 40 of them, went along with the deposition, and they all anathematized Saint John Chrysostom. And those 40 bishops basically were not in communion with anybody except the Orthodox Western. So essentially, you had a situation in which for like something 7 years, the Orthodox churches in the East and the West did not commune with each other, the main churches, and they did not commune. And in fact, the tantamount position of the Orthodox Westerners was that they were almost dealing with like schismatics. Now, they never went technically that far. There was a lot of opposition to declaring that, but there were still people who were saints who died in that 7-year period in Constantinople. All right, and they were never taken off the calendar when in 415 the schism among the churches. Right, you know how we pray in the prayer book, heal the schisms of the churches. All right, so obviously it's recognizing there is some possible break between local churches can happen. So they can never really answer that question. And the same thing you could talk about the cases of like the 2nd century between like the Paschal dating, or the situation in Antioch, which extended throughout the entire East. There was really no capacity to deal with those questions, because otherwise you'd have to say that various saints in the East or were schismatics or something like that for this 5-year period or 7-year period. So I mean, I don't think you have to say every single guy who calls himself true Orthodox is like part of the church. I don't accept that position. Simply because it puts too much on someone. I think
it's the confession of faith.
The best answer is to say that your communion of churches, like our communion of churches, we are the church. And if somebody else says they are the church, we're willing, and they're in good faith, and we're willing to deal with them, and they come from a true Orthodox background and such, that's fine. But obviously we have to take care of our own people first. And this frankly happens in times of great schism and heresy. There's really no way you can read times of great schism and heresy and see how these things transpire. All right, because there is in fact this this understanding of church history that I see from people that sort of says things like, well, one is the false understanding that says that Saint Athanasius communed with the Arians, which there is no evidence he ever did that. Right?
Yeah,
that was his whole one of his reasons for fighting. And the other is to sort of pretend as if Saint Athanasius, let's say like Saint Basil and others, were celebrating together. In fact, I think the evidence seems to be that like during the time all of Saint Basil's life, there is no evidence that, for example, he was able to share communion with the people from Italy, Orthodox from Italy. And that was because, remember, St. Basil was in communion with St. Meletius of Antioch. St. Meletius was not recognized by Egypt or the Western churches. They, in fact, regarded St. Meletius as a schismatic. And in fact, that was an attitude for decades, and it wasn't really until like around 480 that they finally got everybody to say no, St. Meletius was actually a real saint and such. Even though everything had been supposedly healed for 100 years, people were still saying no, he was this fraud or something like that, what have you.
Yep.
So, I mean, the point is that we're in an extraordinary circumstance like those. And to pretend this is like 950 or 590 is and that one guy in Colorado gets to determine he's like the de facto pope is insane and crazy, especially if he's a Christ heretic.
Well, this is kind of related, and it's the next question: is there some validity to the argument that true Orthodox will just keep dividing amongst themselves? Seeing that the Romanians broke communion was kind of disheartening, honestly. Not trying to be antagonistic. I don't take it antagonistically. Unfortunately, since we're not, again, I'm gonna first off, I'm gonna disclaimer this by pointing out that we're not in communion with either of the bodies that we're talking about here. That said, the reason that they broke communion, at least one of the reasons that they gave for breaking communion, was over COVID and the response to it. Which they felt was too weak of a response. There were other issues. They felt that certain reunions were not resolved. The problem is this, and this is what it always has to come down to. Were they right? Like, many of the problems mentioned in the Romanians' letter, where they justified breaking communion, were things people were complaining about in various countries throughout the world. So it wasn't like it just came out of nowhere. Yes, there's a good and official way to answer it, but sometimes that official way to answer, where we try to avoid saying that we were wrong sometimes, causes more problems than it starts. So I don't see it as a function of true Orthodoxy that we just love to split apart.
I would also say you can rephrase the question. I could say, is there some validity to the argument that World Orthodox would just keep dividing amongst themselves? Because we've already seen what's happened since 2018.
Yep.
And then the only thing they can claim is that there was like supposedly indirect communions between parties, which is a very strained argument, to be honest. I don't think it historically has been really used as such. I think obviously there are multiple World Orthodox groups at this point.
Yeah, and they use the same arguments to justify themselves.
And I remember when the whole break with the Fanar. And by the way, when I said those things about taking care of our own people, I'm not like, I'm grateful for people who are true Orthodox and that aren't part of our communion of churches. I know many of them, like we talked to them. All right. But I'm just saying, obviously, we can't be in a position where we're constantly having to like fight these people. All right. Especially if they're like friends of us and they don't want to fight us, then I'm not going to do it. Then there's no need for it. Like, for example, like in Russia, Metropolitan Seraphim invited Metropolitan Theodore of Roac to say, look, you want to come talk to us, explain your position. What do you think we should do? What is your, what are the critiques or whatever? He said, fine. All right. And they can sort of resolve those issues. And I lost my point here. I'm sorry. My caffeine is wearing off gradually. I'm sorry.
Well, okay. Well, let me continue on the comments. May God bless them for their service. I assume that's for the visitors to Father Boniface. I'm not sure what that is. Not all World Orthodox people considered St. John schismatic until 15 years ago. There's EP parishes decades old who have him as their patron. Well, that's fine. They might have joined last year because of the Ukraine war, but the simple reality is that the official position of the Ecumenical Patriarchate was that St. John Maximovich was a schismatic until 2007, and they openly referred to him as such, and sometimes their official Twitter and news accounts still refer to him as such. Sometimes their archons still refer to him as such. So yeah, you could say that maybe there's some people in the EP who venerate St. John as a saint. Well, that's great. On the plus side, there are also people in the EP who also venerate Mother Teresa.
Well, remember the MP during the whole 60s and 50s and 60s claimed the roll call was under interdict.
Yeah.
And they claimed that under interdict, none of their sacraments were valid.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's what interdict means. All right.
Yeah.
So St. John Maximovich died in that. I remember having this debate with Father George Yuri Maximov, George Maximov.
Yeah.
And you know, the only thing they could hold on to was trying to claim that St. John Maximovich had apparently, they claimed he commemorated Patriarch Alexei the First in when he was in Shanghai, but that's not what really happened at all. And then of course he repudiated any communion with the MP. So, you know, obviously their attitudes had to change over the years thereafter and such. Because obviously, if you're claiming he died under interdict, I mean, you can claim that MP people went to his funeral and they said he was a holy man, but you got to remember what lay people are claiming. That is not necessarily the teaching of
their church.
Body. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I encountered for years. I've encountered World Orthodox people who say we are against ecumenism and we think you have valid sacraments, and so that's great.
No one's personal opinion matters.
Yeah, I'm very happy to hear that. I said, what do your bishops think? And then they sort of understand, yeah, you're right. You know, so you can't get too angry at us for what we say when your own leaders aren't too friendly terms with us. For obvious reasons, there's fundamental doctrinal differences.
Orthodox Theothanatos said, I like that comparison to the Uniates venerating St. Mark of Ephesus and Polymus. Food for thought. Thanks.
Now,
true.
real quick, just to make one comment. St. Gregory Palamas, when the Antiochian Melkites left the church and joined, the papacy told them they have to take St. Gregory Palamas off the calendar. All right. That was, in fact, the standard position through the 1700s and 1800s. And it was the putting of St. Gregory Palamas back on the Union calendar was something that Slipsky, I can't remember his name.
Metropolitan Joseph Sleepy?
Yeah, he was the big proponent of that and such. And because remember, the technical position of the Vatican was that St. Gregory Palamas is a heretic.
Yeah.
That was their traditional position until the 20th century. They began to kind of lessen it for ecumenical reasons because they just gave up on everything else. So why did they care about this anymore?
Yeah.
Right? So.
Robin Baptiste got baptized in World Orthodox Union Church of the Romanian Patriarchate, dedicated to St. John Maximovich. A layman there was angry at me because I was claiming St. John was true Orthodox. Well, yeah, of course he'd be angry at you for that. I mean, the point is, one thing to remember is that many of these people that are not involved in actively deceiving they're going to experience severe cognitive dissonance if you say something like that to them. It's going to upset them to no end. Something to keep in mind.
Remember, when we say true Orthodox, we're talking about basically simply Orthodox. Like everybody in the 19th century who was part of the Orthodox Patriarchate.
We're all true Orthodox to us.
All right?
Yeah.
They wouldn't necessarily use the term true Orthodox all the time, all right? Because there was no large heretical movement claiming to be Orthodox like the Patriarchate, like the ecumenists and the Patriarchates claiming to be the legitimate Orthodox.
Everyone gets a Patriarchate in a decade. Now, Father Antonio says, and I believe this is about elder cults, one sure sign is that they will try and control who you are in contact with and forbid contact with those who they claim are anathema in some ways.
Yeah.
That is true. That is a very big sign of an elder
Especially
cult.
there are lay people in these other groups that will form like their own clique and will try to bully clergy. I mean, I saw that. Yeah, I won't go too far, but a few people tried to do that years ago in one of our missions, and that was shut down real quick.
Yep.
And then they got angry and left because you simply cannot have, some people doing that because they will destroy a mission, which may be what they want to do in some cases.
Yeah. Have you any information about the circumstances of the death of the martyr who, I assume it's new martyr Jose Munoz Cortez, the keeper of the Ivan icon? He was recently he was glorified as a saint by Rokana and the S-Talk last month, I believe. As for his death, it was pretty violent. When it was first reported in 1997, I remember because I, converted and, suddenly realized I had to become Orthodox right around the time that I learned, they just murdered a guy in Greece. And so it was kind of fresh in my mind that basically, if I remember correctly, they bound him and drugged him and basically poisoned him to death. But, they try to claim that he was originally They tried to cover it up and say that it was a drug overdose, but too many people noticed that he was tied up. So how did the drug addict tie himself up? And so those are some of the details I remember, but it's pretty horrifying.
That's kind of like the cases of the people who get tied up and they commit suicide.
Shot. Yeah,
by shooting themselves in the back of the head with a shotgun 12 times.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing. It's kind of Arkansas-sided, if you want to say that. And then where's a good place to learn about Matthew White history?
The old Marcoux archive on SlideShare that has a lot of something like 20 or 30 documents.
It'll give you the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yes.
Then response to people who say the church isn't made up of one patriarch or bishop. The church is more than that. It's the laity and the priest, so we shouldn't flee. Next message. Is there historical precedent for parallel bishoprics versus just non-commemorating before the ecumenical council? Those that argue the gates of hell won't prevail. How to explain that they're not the church? There is a historical precedent for parallel bishoprics in almost every century of church history.
Especially when there are groups of heretics who take power and they claim that they start deposing people or excommunicating people who are the Orthodox.
We went through two sets of parallel bishoprics in just this episode alone, and that would be the followers of Saint John Chrysostom, who became a parallel hierarchy, and the 3 or 4 parallel hierarchies that existed during the schism involving Saint Meletius.
Because if you read Rufinus the presbyter, or Rufinus of Aquileia's his addition to the ecclesiastical history of Eusebius, he wrote book 11 and 12 to update it. And what you discover is that a lot of times I've heard people say, oh, this whole thing between Paulinus of Antioch and St. Meletius was just a local thing in the city of Antioch. Well, not so whatsoever, because Rufinus and others point out that Paulinus went around even in Syria, even in Palestine, consecrating bishops that were in communion with St. Athanasius. And St. Meletius, because at that time Antioch technically had the presidency throughout all the East, including what would later become the Jerusalem Patriarchs. They have their own competing bishops there as well. Now that's a case of 2 parallel Orthodox hierarchies, and that both of them are antagonistic, and one of them simply takes the Eustathians, so-called Paulinians, just simply took in the St. Meletius's people and just rebaptized them. All right.
Yeah, I mean,
which is really extreme, and that got so bad that I think in Rome and in Alexandria they had to say, no, you can't do that. They thought that was going to destroy any hope of a future reconciliation. And one segment of them later broke with Paulinus, the segment led by Luciferus of Cagliari, who was in fact the original bishop that did the single hand consecration for Paulinus. All right, because he claimed anybody who had ever been, he claimed he didn't want to have any communion with anybody. He was a very controversial figure, and Saint Augustine and Saint Ambrose say he sort of ended up dying in a schism on Sardinia. Although Saint Jerome says he repented of the schism before he died, because that's a case of somebody who was a true Orthodox struggler, but they became in essence so, I don't know, the word is paranoid, so overly pseudo strict, I guess, that he began, to say, oh, everybody's got to be rechrismated, got to reordain people,
Sound familiar, everyone?
Or he would say that or he would say if you come from St. Meletius or Paulinus, you're never going to be ordained a priest because I can never trust you, and just send me your people and they'll get rebaptized. All right. And that was completely destructive.
Well, I will, and if I may interrupt there, because that is still completely destructive.
Absolutely.
And we still see this happening among sometimes even true Orthodox groups doing this to each other's people. And I will say this, I am not going to name names today. I do have an article to write about one such horrendous practice, but the best thing for people to do is own up to it and just say they made a mistake. If not, I mean, we could point out just how horrible and destructive this practice has historically been and how horrible and destructive this practice is now.
The other thing to point out is I think we're in a situation where the whole old world imperial royalist Orthodox Commonwealth system, that's over with. Okay. And with the fall of the Tsar, the Orthodox Roman monarchy, therefore went I mean, it was nothing but schism and heresy right after that. Almost immediately broke out right after they killed the Tsar. And that's not, unless, and without that figurehead, we're not going to see a situation. Because people forget, ecumenical councils were, in many cases, the culmination of decades of previous schisms and heresies. They got put together because the emperor was either they finally got an Orthodox emperor who was, and it wasn't the Pope who did this, all right? And it wasn't one patriarch who did this. It was generally the Orthodox emperor surrounded by at least some saints, all right, who worked together, and they found sympathetic bishops, and they got together an ecumenical council. And even some of those ecumenical councils, like the Second Ecumenical Council, like there were no representatives from Italy or Spain went there, because they had thought they didn't want to go there. Even the Egyptian bishops only showed up the very end of the council. But in the end, even Rome had to acknowledge that council. Like, that was the weird thing. Saying Second Ecumenical Council was held. Its president was Saint Meletius, and then I think Saint Kirill, and neither of them were in communion with the Bishop of Rome.
Yeah.
All right. But by the time you get to 431, Rome had already recognized that council, and recognized people essentially who died out of the outward communion with the Orthodox bishops of Rome and the Orthodox Western bishops. But the problem, again, is that we don't have any of those circumstances. This is why, again, when I hear people talking about we need to have an ecumenical council, it's a noble idea, but I don't think they realize how difficult it was to get those things together. Because remember, even in the post-schism period, the papacy just called an ecumenical council almost seemed like every 70 years. Like, this is why they have like 21 councils or something like that. And they simply were more or less rubber stamps for the predetermined policy of the papacy in almost every case. Those bear little to no resemblance to the ecumenical councils of the 7 ecumenical councils. They simply do not bear any resemblance to it. Unfortunately, I think I see the world simply as disintegrating further. Yeah. And it's not going to be pretty.
Well, not in the short term, at least.
Not in in the long run, obviously, it's going to.
We never would. Yeah. Henry DiCarlo asks, they still ask how Unionists practice hesychasm since their bishops claim hesychasm is heresy. They don't. They practice some, I would call it kind of, for lack of a better term, a sort of fetishism. And what I mean by that is that hesychasm, even among Orthodox Christians, is usually limited to large monasteries where there are many monastics and many of the elder ones have that time for prayer. It's not realistic. A guy walking around with a prayer rope and saying the Jesus prayer as he runs a podcast isn't a hesychast. He's not doing hesychasm. He's showing off his prayer rope. A guy who claims hesychasm, who isn't doing the Jesus prayer, not just regularly, but a lot of the time, isn't doing hesychasm. Uniates, who quite frankly are not doing orthodoxy, are not doing hesychasm. They're showing off their prayer robes and trying to look like hesychasts. It's a form of LARPing.
I'd also say always beware of somebody who goes around publishing books with their face on it and promotes themselves as an elder.
Yeah.
You find those all the time in Russia and in Greece. Among
there are a lot. Yeah,
patriarchate.
That's true.
If somebody says, "Oh, the reflections of Abbot Archimandrite Michael," and then it's him on the cover and like full of like 40.
And he looks very pious, and he's all like
no. Like, that is not how.
I'm ready for my close up, Mr. DeMille.
That is simply not how true Orthodox elders do not promote themselves. All right.
No.
In many cases, even if even they understand that self-promotion is very dangerous. It's prideful. And even they discourage people from trying to promote them because that can affect them. All right. People can come to them and say, "Oh, holy elder." Nobody who's a holy elder wants you to come up to them and call them a holy elder.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Even if you're not a holy elder, but you're just a regular, like most of us, all of us, struggling Orthodox Christians, don't come up to us, and whether we're bishops or priests. Obviously, bishops, priests, there is a formal etiquette where you ask for blessings and things like that and kiss the hand. That is not because of who we are person. That's because of the office of the priesthood. All right, because you have to remember, we also do not want to be put in a position where people are trying to put us on a pedestal or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, you have to respect the bishops and the priesthood, obviously, but on the other hand, we're not going to go out there and start publishing books with like 100 pictures on us. I mean, obviously, if you're writing a church history, obviously some of us may appear in it, but that's incidental to the fact if it's a historical fact.
Yeah,
as opposed
you start seeing people preening themselves.
Like if I wrote a book called, Reflections of the Holy Elder Bishop Enoch. I mean, that would be crazy. I mean, if I
like The Life of Archbishop Gregory by Archbishop Gregory.
Yeah, if I wrote a book called The Life of Bishop Enoch of Apshon, I mean, it'd be extremely boring. I can't imagine anybody would want to read it. It'd just be absurdly boring. And secondly, there wouldn't be much to it. But thirdly, there is a saying that comes from the fathers. Saint Eusebius of Vercelli said it. Saint Maximus of Turin said it, and it goes back to the Book of Wisdom. And it's that praise a man only after he dies.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good rule.
And why do you do that? Because Saint Maximus of Turin, who reposed around 450 at the age of 455, he was like age of 105 when he died. Saint Maximus and you can find his homilies actually translated. But St. Maximus makes the point that if it's like a sailor, okay, there's this big storm happening. You're on the ship, you're on the tackle and putting up the sail and trying to keep it from capsizing. Imagine you're looking at these guys from afar, okay, and you're seeing these sailors doing a great job, okay. Don't praise them yet. You can encourage them, okay, but wait till they get to the haven. Wait till they get to the dock, all right. And that's sort of the way to think about it. So when is it we get to the dock? Well, that's when we die. Our soul leaves our body, the particular judgment, and we go to if we die repentant, we go to paradise to be with the Lord. Okay.
So just to read off some more. That was a perfect answer.
Absolutely.
To read off some more.
The Bishop of Palestine. Yep, I know that case.
Yep, the restoring of the bishops from Palestine. Let me see here.
That was the case in the Lateran Synod. It appointed I can't remember his name, Bishop Theodore, I believe, to basically go to Palestine and receive and consecrate new bishops to replace the Monophyllite hierarchy.
No. Orthodoxy of Thanatos says, thank you. It's just hard for a layman to dig through all these things with limited time. I appreciate you. God willing, everyone keeps publishing things. I'm sure that they will.
No, I would just real quick about Orthodox of Thanatos' point. You will find cases like, for example, like people point out the case of Nestorius, which we've talked about to death. Remember, from the time Nestorius was publicly accused of heresy unto the Third Ecumenical Council was about 3-year period.
Yeah.
And it was a big period of controversy. A lot of bishops ceased commemoration of him. He claimed they deposed. They were.
Yeah, there was no friendly Kumbaya moment with the Nestorians.
What's true is Saint Kirill of Alexandria realized he had to do this he was not on the ground. And he could not travel there at the moment, so he had to exchange this series of 3 or 4 letters publicly with Nestorius. All right, but remember, the Third Ecumenical Council exonerated all those people that Nestorius had falsely deposed.
Yep.
If they were deposed for cases of orthodoxy, obviously, it was not considered. It was nullified. It was considered real deposition.
Okay. And then humanism came after the fall of the Tsar. Tsar was killed 1918. EP encyclical 1920. 2 Thessalonians 2:6. Yes, 1924 calendar change. That's a reference to he who restrains.
If lawlessness is already at work, and only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way.
Okay.
Of course. Okay. So just one point, real quick. There were proto-ecumenisms that began to happen in the late 19th century, but what you find out is the Russian Tsardom, the Russian Orthodox Commonwealth, always opposed those and always got the ecumenical patriarch to stop that. All right. For example, the famous Joachim III's encyclical about should we change the calendar or whatever, and should we have more ecumenical movement back in 1903? The Russian Governing Synod responded with their 1904 encyclical, which said absolutely, they were friendly, but they said absolutely not. And because of the pressure from the Tsar and the Russian bishops, the sort of crypto-ecumenical fiends and these patriarchates were never able to gain power were never able to go out in public as long as the Tsar was around. All right.
And Father Antonio said, Well, I don't see where to join as a member. What am I missing? Next to the subscribe button on the YouTube, there's a join member. There's different levels of membership. I haven't really developed too many things that I wanted to develop for like the member perk section, but I will be getting into that more as we now have 2 members, so I really should do that. Piggyback on that comment, everyone I've talked to says to do the Jesus prayer all the time. Are your comments more directed to the pride flaunting or the actual attempt to do what you're describing? No, it's the pride and flaunting. The point is, if you have the time to say the Jesus prayer, you should. Don't call that Hesychast. Just call it saying the Jesus prayer. You'll eventually know the difference. Christ said not to let the right hand know what the left is doing. Pray in your closet. Very good. Non-stop, if you can. But
hesychasm is more than just physically saying the Jesus prayer.
Right.
It eventually is an internal self-purification by the grace of the Holy Spirit and
Right.
the participation of the sacraments, where, as we know, the prayer descends into your inner being, your heart.
Yes.
Right. And that is something very few people achieve. You do have figures like St. Paul of Thebes, St. Anthony the Great, St. Benedict, I believe. St. Gregory Palamas talks about how St. Benedict was able to see the whole universe in a single ray of light. There were great saints like that. And remember, St. Benedict, when he reposed in relative obscurity. People forget this. He had 2 monasteries. One of them had kicked him out and tried to poison him.
Right, that was Subiaco.
Yeah, exactly. He died in Monte Cassino.
And it wasn't until St. Gregory's life that he really became a lot more popular.
I think what happened is after his death, gradually the monasteries began to grow. They founded more places. St. Gregory the Great had taken monastic vows under the rule of St. Benedict previously. St. Gregory the Great founded like 7 monasteries or 8 monasteries around Rome. So you're dealing often with figures, in the case of St. Benedict, who sort of died from an external worldview, they would have died as supposed failures. But as you know, as the prophet Samuel says in the Old Testament, he says, the Lord doesn't see as men see. Men see the outside, but God sees the heart. And undoubtedly, there probably were a great many people who were true hesychasts among the millions, maybe not millions, but at least probably a large number, a few hundred, maybe, who knows, among the new martyrs in Russia. Monks who just simply got shot, worked to death in a camp, and we don't even necessarily know their names other than calling them the new martyrs.
Yep.
And those are examples, I think, of probably men who were true elders, who never sought to promote themselves, who never sought to get their friends to promote them. And if God wanted them revealed to more people to help them, then God would do that.
Okay. Let me see here. Orthodoxy is Thanatos. I guess that's what I meant. Most priests, monks I spoke with. I just wanted to check because some World Orthodox monastics have told me the TO don't do the Jesus prayer and only worry about ecumenism in the calendar. Okay, so they lied to you. Wanted to make sure there was a bunk claim on their part. I suppose thrown at y'all. Yeah, it was. That isn't true. LOL.
We don't publish books about how we're so great. We don't publish
books about our expertise at the Jesus prayer, where I've cleaned my beard, and I could, and I'd probably sell out, just because lying sells. But imagine saying, "Oh, they don't give alms to the poor. All they talk about is ecumenism." Orthodox Traditionalist Publications, or as we call them here, OTP. What's up? Somebody was asking about the documents between Rocor and the Lake Hof between St. John. I know you have archivist friends. If you could find those would be super handy. Our prayer rule and feats of asceticism are between us and our spiritual father. Absolutely. Father bless. What is Father Boniface making for supper tonight from Matushka Maria? Father Boniface, what's for dinner?
Same thing I had last week.
Okay. What was that?
Salmon, celery, fried onions, with some cassava flour and some, let me see. It was cassava flour along with some sorghum flour. And then some flax. And then, so cook it up, fry it up, and see, I got a very strict diet, and I got to really watch what I eat, and that I don't react to it. So that's what I'm doing. Same thing I did last week, except that I had the microphone muted, and I did most of my cooking before the podcast. So there.
All right. I think, Father Joseph, we're reaching the 2-hour mark. And if we don't have any more questions, we will. You're muted, Father Joseph.
I know I'm muted. That is because a dog is
Doggo.
decided to go insane right about now. But that's okay. First off, I want to say thank you to everybody who called in, everybody who contributed with their questions, with their comments, with their conversations, with that. Again, we finally have an intro. I'm working on an outro, and we're gonna make some sense out of this sort of mash of a thing. I want to thank everybody coming in and listening. At some time, we need to do a mega 3-hour stream.
I think we did that on the New Year's.
We did it on New Year's.
That
We're
was as
going to
much
do
as I
another one.
could do.
I am going to be doing another stream this week because I should be finished with The Rise and Fall of the Papacy by Patrick Craig Trulia. We did set a new record, but we'll try to break the record. And until then, everybody.
If Carl, who asked about the medieval political thought book, if he has a Gab account, he can also contact me in Gab.
Okay.
Because I might know a few people who also have read that text and such.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'll try. Because I was just looking through the table of contents, and it's basically half the book he's talking about. So I'll try to go through it and see what he says.
Okay. Did either Sava, Ezekiel,
I'm going to go ahead and go. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good.
God bless.
Thank you. Okay, Father Boniface, Saba, I know that. Did you guys? Anyone have anything else to add here?
Can you repeat?
Okay.
Just repeat the title.
If you had any last thoughts before we close out.
No, not really.
Okay.
Not here.
Saba, you're good?
Well, just saying hello. I just finally feel well enough to actually speak.
All right.
So,
well,
Benedicite.
Let me see here. Yeah, it looks like we got last minute questions. I'm going to try to answer these quick. Do you foresee a pan-true Orthodox council eventually? Just the fact of united true Orthodox bodies en masse is only about 12 years old. So 13 years old. So the point is, we're still working on the logistics. We have seen international councils of true Orthodox churches meeting in Synaxis. That's the first step. And that just has to become more regular. And with time, it will work out. Eventually, it can be done. It'll be a pan-Orthodox council, obviously not an imperial council, unless somebody manages to take over some part of land and declare themselves Orthodox king and offer all of us amnesty and free churches. And okay, maybe not free churches, but okay. Anyway, that hasn't happened yet. So it's possible. It is possible. Okay, Macarius has joined the stage. Timing is very interesting. What's your question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Kingdom Enjoyer from the Discord.
Oh, hey, Kingdom Enjoyer. Well, Macarius. Okay, hi, Macarius. How are you doing?
Nice to meet you. I just was curious. I just wanted to follow up with one of the questions that George guy had.
Okay.
I think I could probably clarify something for him.
Okay.
One of the things he was talking to me about was the argument that heresy has to be declared in council prior to anyone separating from.
That's never how any heresy worked in any ecumenical council.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, but it's from my standpoint, it seems that it's the new calendar's position to basically take a papist view on ecclesiology in that standpoint. Like they're basically saying that heresy is only declared by the church hierarchy, and then if you it's just, I don't know if you could say anything on that just to clarify for him.
They're using the patriarch as a proxy for the pope because it is basically papism in another form. What they're basically doing is saying because the patriarch has not declared this a heresy, it can't possibly be a real heresy. That's ridiculous. It's not how things worked. Many times it was patriarchs themselves who said the heretical things, and no, there didn't need to be an ecumenical council for it. All of those constructions fit in the category I made it up, and so we should treat them accordingly.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Father.
No problem. God bless you. You have a great rest of your night. I have one last question here.
God be with you, Father.
Okay, take care. And here we go. Haunted Umam. And Haunted Umam, he says, I'm catching up on the stream, but toward Bishop Enoch, do you have a recommendation of where to read about the aftermath from St. John Chrysostom reposing in exile? There's a really good treatment that Orthodox Traditionalist Publications, if you go to their blog, the OTP blog, it's orthodoxtraditionalist.com/blog. It's by a New Calendar priest, Father Alexander Katsopoulos. He actually gives a treatment of that entire period. I think it's called the Schism of the Johnites, and it talks about how that entire period and how well organized it was, and it was a real alternate hierarchy that St. John sponsored and continued to run after his illegal deposition. Yep, it is. He said on my blog that the compromise says, haha, we'll see about a 4-hour stream. We will. Source, I made it up. That is correct. Everybody, thank you for all of your assistance. Just a quick update. I am in the middle of fixing my car, so thank God that's going to be taken care of. We have some new plans. As I mentioned, we've got another show coming this week about the papacy book, and there's a lot more happening. We always need your support, so always reach out to us, and thank you for your calls, for your comments, for your questions, for your participation, for your prayers. And in that case, you're the oldest priest here, Father, so you give the blessing. And okay, maybe he's eating. All right. Well, may God bless you in the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Have a great night, everyone.